Welcome to the Kingdom Educators Podcast, where we empower Christian teachers to grab a hold of heaven's hope-filled perspective so you can activate transformational impact in your classroom and community. I'm your host, Jessica Glover, and I warmly welcome you to wake up to your strategic placement as a kingdom educator, anointed by the Creator and equipped by all of heaven to release the radical goodness of God that will transform lives and reshape education. Dear fear, disappointment, and overwhelm, we're breaking up with you. It's time to upgrade to thriving classrooms this new school year, where the peace, joy, and miracle-working power of God transforms lives. Your Kingdom Classroom is the ultimate course package for Christian educators seeking more than just survival in our challenging educational landscape. It's perfect for public and private school teachers on a mission with God. This course is designed to help you move from overwhelm and disappointment to empowering you to host God's peace, joy, and miracle-working power in your classroom. You will receive tools to clear the path for transformation, create a thriving vision, and design a classroom culture that hosts the presence of God and honors students' true identities. Expect to upgrade your classroom atmosphere, enhance classroom management, and see motivation and learning outcomes soar. Enjoy transformational impact in as little as a week. Visit kingdomeducators.com/YKC to learn more today. And for a limited time, save $50 using discount code CE2024 at checkout. Welcome back to Ripple Effect of Love in Your Classroom, Part 2 with Dawn Rowe. If you took a listen to last week's episode, you will know that we're diving into how do we create a culture where we can help students truly step into their true identities. And next week, we'll examine teacher identities. Now for the show.
My AP psychology classes can get really close-knit. Mm-hmm. And if I have time, I'll have the kids get in a big circle. So we're sitting in a circle looking at each other. Mm-hmm. And we will go kid by kid around the room. So we'll get to Jeff. And once again, I'll limit it. Okay, 4 people say something about Jeff. And then we'll go to Allie. 4 people talk about Allie. And then you just go around the room. Now, that can take over a period to do. So you have to plan for something like that. And you got to have the space in your curriculum to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
If I feel like I don't have time, then I just do, like I said earlier, spotlight one day, one time for 4 minutes or 3 minutes.
Do you keep a list and then you can kind of be like, well, we did this kiddo and we're going to try to do the other ones on other days?
With the Pray Pride Awards. Mm-hmm. And then we also have these postcards at school. Uh-huh. And we mail these postcards home to the parents of Jeff. I want to tell you what a pleasure it is to have your kid in my class.
So good.
These are the beautiful things I'm seeing in your kid. Now, their kid might be a D student. Mm-hmm. That kid still has value and beauty. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be called out as much as the A student, right? Mm-hmm. And when you call out a kid like that, that's like FDC student, my gosh, when I do that out of sincerity, I will see that kid go from a D to an A or a D to a B because they know I love them.
Wow.
They may have hated history their whole life, but now they know their teacher believes in them and now they care about the class. Yeah. I see that all the time. Like, I rarely have kids fail my classes, and the administrators are the ones who have been like, you need to write a book. And here's the thing. I didn't know how to write that book until I got trained by Winship. Once I got trained by him, then I was like, okay, I have the words to write the book. So that's how that all came to be. Plus, my pastor pulled me aside one day and he said, Dawn, I think you're supposed to do something crazy. And I'm like, Bob, what? What do you want me to do? And he said, I think you're supposed to write a book. And I said, well, I could probably do that, but what do you think I'm supposed to write it about? He said, the way that you do your classroom.
Yeah.
And that was the same time I was doing the intensive training by Jamie and Donna Winship through Identity Exchange.
Yeah.
It was several months of training by them in person.
Okay.
We read like 15 books also. It was so good.
Wow.
Yeah. On top of teaching, on top of my dad dying.
Oh my goodness.
He died like on a Wednesday or Thursday. And I went to the training that Friday. My family said, go.
Wow.
And another man at that training, his mom died that week, and we both went to the training. That's how powerful and life-giving the trainings are.
You're supposed to be there.
Yeah, you can be in the middle of the deepest grief you'll ever go through. And this teaching by the Winships will just set you free in the middle of it.
That's so good. And I'll put that information in the show notes just so folks know. Now, the other thing that you said you were going to say too, Dawn, was will you talk about being transparent when we talk about hosting love?
Yeah. So being transparent, I used to get ridiculed for that when I was a beginning teacher. I was the young kid on the block. Everybody in my school was in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Me too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my school was older.
Yeah, so I was the kid, right?
Yep.
And I got trained really well at Pacific Lutheran University. I had excellent teachers that were Christian in my education department, and I had a really good ed psych class. And so I was trained to be transparent.
Okay.
But it's also easy for me because of my personality. Not everybody's as transparent because it's very uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I get so you kind of have to figure out what works for you. But I tell them everything. I mean, there's some things I won't share. Like when my dad died and I came back a couple weeks later, I told them what it was like to go through that.
Students in classroom and your staff too.
They want to know. They love me. They want to know what I'm going through. They want to help me. So here's a cool story. That year, I had a girl, and her name was Lauren. She was a sophomore. Then I had her again as a senior in my AP Psych. So I had her in history.
Okay.
Then I had her in AP Psych. And she said to me her senior year, Mrs. Rowe, I just want you to know that I learned a lot from you when you were grieving over the death of your dad. And that's because I shared my heart about what I was going through. So there'll be moments when I start to cry. And I'm like, okay, guys, give me a second. I'm having an emotional moment. And I let that, it's the Holy Spirit. I get goosebumps. I get emotional. I have to wait for the Holy Spirit to kind of wash through me. And then I say, okay, I'm ready. And then I share whatever the thing is I'm going through. And then what that does is it opens the door for them to be like, okay, I want to share my thing. And then before you know it, we're like family in my classroom. And I think that's what a lot of teachers lack. Like they get uncomfortable. They don't want to go there because they don't want to know the kids' stuff. I don't think it's for everybody, but I then have a ton of people I can refer the kids to. I have a list of counselors. We have amazing counselors at our school now. And so I can just be like, here's who you can go talk to. I'm not your counselor.
Yeah.
I'll listen to you, but I'm not the one to counsel you. And then I just give them all sorts of resources and, they take it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're providing this space that they probably are not finding other places, or they've not been taught to be vulnerable or real. And so you providing transparency yourself, of course, like in any even small group or at church or whatever, it's like when we're transparent, we allow people to be real and then they feel at home with us.
Yeah. You know Powerful. What Jamie does? He works with CEOs that make millions of dollars or billions. And I'll never forget one of his stories. This will give you good insight on how he gets a room to become transparent. Okay. And you can do this in your classroom. So these people were introducing themselves, and the first guy was like, well, I'm CEO of this company and my net worth is blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah. Then the next guy is like, well, I am a CEO of this company, but my net worth is only blah, blah, blah. And then they're all comparing to one another and judging each other and feeling shame, guilt, fear, because now they don't measure up, right?
Yeah.
After that happened, Jamie said, okay, I didn't learn anything from any of you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to share what's your biggest fear. And then the walls come down and people realize that they're people and they can relate to one another, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. And didn't they also have similar fears?
Yep.
And then it made them, you can relate.
Then you can relate, and then you're able to connect with those people that you relate to and talk to them on break. And now you're forming friendships, and now you're forming a network.
Yeah.
And now you have friends for life that are going to encourage you in your work instead of compete against you.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, that's beautiful.
Yes.
It's important for kids to realize that their test scores are not who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So like Jamie and Donna, they're in Tennessee right now, and they are in a school district where they've worked with the high schools in the area and junior highs and probably elementary, but I know high school and junior high. And the test scores skyrocketed after Jamie and Donna went in there and taught the students their identity.
Oh, that is so powerful.
Yeah. And then when they went around to the principals and said, why do you think your test scores went up? They all said because of the identity training. But there was one school that wouldn't do it and their test scores didn't go up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here's a really good story I would love to reshare.
Yeah.
This is about a kid that they did the training at a school. I think he was a 7th or 8th grader.
Now, when you say training, Dawn, just so we get our listeners know, will you share real quick what they did? No, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay.
So they went into a school and they trained teachers on how to receive their identity so that they could give their students the teaching on how students can receive their identity, which is what I do too.
You have teachers invite God, or do you use the word love? How do you do it? What does it look like?
Let's get to that.
Okay.
Because that's going to have a lot of steps and take a bit of time.
Okay.
So Jamie and Donna went through, talked to the administrators, talked to the students, and I don't know how many hours, I don't know how many days, but I know in one instance, the principal came up to him and said, hey, we have a kid we're ready to expel. And it's hard, really hard to expel a kid now because of federal law. Okay. So they sat the kid down, Jamie did, and met with him and basically was asking him about his identity. Like, what makes you get up in the morning? Like, what are you passionate about? And this young boy, junior high age, says music theory. Like, what? He even knew that term. Kind of blows me away. And so Jamie's like, well, let us figure out how to foster this in you. Let's get you some lessons. I think it was guitar. Let's get you a guitar. Let's get you lessons. And this kid was being raised by his grandpa, and he and his grandpa didn't have a tight relationship. But long story short, he and grandpa started to connect. He got the lessons. He started to feel good about who he was. He was doing something he was passionate about. And that next year, he was on the honor roll at his school.
So incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. I showed that video. There's a interview that he's done with Chris Valentin on that same story to teachers a couple different times. And every time it gets me, because I'm like, if we would just pause to ask, have the kiddo check in with, what do you think you were made for?
Yeah, that's basically what you do when you're teaching identity. Now, this would take a while to do all of this, but in a nutshell, you've got your classroom, you've established some culture. You have to have the culture established. They have to trust you. They need to know that you love them deeply. And I can get away with doing that early in the year, but I don't know that every teacher can pull that off. Like, it takes a while to build culture. Some classrooms longer than others, right?
Yeah.
So I do it at the beginning of the year, and then I revisit it as the year goes on because it fits into my psychology curriculum 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
And then sometimes it's semester I get new kids, so I need to revisit it anyway. But basically, you have a classroom of kids. You've established culture. You've established trust. And I tend to do it in the personality unit. Okay, you guys have learned your personality. Now we're going to really look at the core of who you are. Like, why are you on this planet? Do you think you have a purpose? I happen to think you have a purpose. I happen to think you're all unique, and none of you are going to have the same purpose. They might be similar, but not exactly the same. So let's see if we can figure that out today. And then I have them get quiet, close their eyes, and I say, okay, we're going to ask love, whatever love looks like to you. And what does love say that you are at the core? It could be something that your parents, grandparents, teachers have spoken over you since you started school or since you were born. Maybe they saw leadership in you since you were born, and maybe you're not really walking in that now because maybe somebody ridiculed you in 3rd grade and you feel like you can't be a leader. So we're going to take a look at the lies you've listened to. We're going to exchange them for truth, and we're going to see what love says about you today. And they'll come up with words like, okay, Mrs. Rowe, I heard kind. Okay, now that's cool. I don't want to demean that, but a lot of you are going to hear that you're kind. But I want you to take it further. Kind. Are you going to be extra kind to the special ed community at your school? Are you going to be extra kind to the drama kids at your school? Like, what does that mean? Who are you kind to? Maybe your kindness is for your family. So let's see if you can get a title that says kind to or broken for, like my heart breaks for the voiceless, or I'm an advocate for the voiceless. Now, those are like high school terms, right? Because I'm working with 9 to 12.
Yeah.
But little kids can hear too. And they'll say things like, I'm a good friend. And so will high school. And you can get little kids to hear and fine tune as well. Even as like Chelsea that you've interviewed, she does that with elementary. She does it with kindergarten. And Becca Raymond Hutchins, she's done it in all grades because she's taught 5th, 4th, 3rd. Awesome. So a lot of teachers do this already. They just don't know that it can also be called identity. And then when a kid knows their identity, they're resilient, they're fearless, they're full of courage, they're ready to go be who they're meant to be. And if somebody talks smack about them, they can learn to let that roll off their back because they know it's not true.
That's so good.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you encourage them to even say out loud, Dawn, that's not who I am? Yeah. That's so good. Because in my middle school classroom, one of the biggest things I felt like that I could do, and I didn't know anything about Jamie Winship back then. This was like, 2008, 2009, right in that time frame. But like being able to recognize and honor each person for who they were. And I use their name instead of having them listen to Perfect Love, which it's a starting point, but it opens them up going, oh, there's more than what I thought. And I have purpose. And then when we invite love to come in, it's like he reminds them of their value. It like adds on this whole nother level, but being able to, for them to go, that's not who I am. And that's not how I behave. And even creating a management system where we're calling our kids up into their true identity. That's another whole level. I encourage listeners to check into that. Like ask the Lord, how could you even take what Dawn's doing with helping kids connect with love himself and knowing their identity and being able to remind them even, hey, remember who you are. Like in Lion King, where the father, he's talking to the son, like in his like night vision or whatever, remember who you are. Like,
yes. And you can show video, like I'm getting so many stories right now just from you saying all of that, but you can show video clips like Lion King or other movies that call identity out of people and show the clip and then talk about it. And I use a program at my school called Josten's Renassaince.
Ooh.
Josten's Renassaince. I'd put that link in your show notes too.
Okay, we'll do that.
Wow. Their curriculum is amazing. And it's great for SEL, social, emotional. And I think it's the best on the market.
Okay.
But I haven't seen them all. So I can't really say that. That was like not a good statement. But I've used a couple different things and the videos are so relevant that kids don't find them cheesy. So I can go to Josten's Renassaince and they'll have videos over every character quality you can think of. Let's say your kids, you're seeing them have a lack of respect. Okay, I'm going to show this 5-minute video on respect and then open it up to the class. What'd you guys learn? My goodness, I'll have a half-hour conversation after that about respect in the classroom.
Wow.
So I highly regard Josten's Renassaince. Their curriculum is phenomenal.
And is that mostly for middle or high school kids?
Well, I don't know. I know middle and high.
Okay.
I don't know about elementary.
Okay.
So I was thinking of other things too, like when you were talking about the kids and their identity. I remember one year, I think it was year before last, girls were in the back corner and I could hear them go, Avery, you're not walking in your true self right now. You need to stop that. So if they started to gossip or backstab or something, they'd just call it out and be like, come on, we got to stop that. That's not who we are. We're above that. We're better than that.
Yeah.
And it's hard for teenagers not to gossip because of social media, just in general. Honestly, it's hard for adults. So if we walk in our true self, we're not going to backstab other people. Not going to.
I love, Dawn, how you said too at the very beginning, it's like you've already created your culture in your classroom where it's safe. And your piece about being transparent adds to that. And I'm just thinking too, like, obviously in your classroom with students being able to call one another up, as I would say, you have also done a lot of work with honoring one another so that there isn't the backstabbing that's happening, so that there's not the snickering or the junk that can sometimes happen if we're not cultivating a culture of honor first, because we've got to have that groundwork laid.
They'll know that that's the thing that will set Mrs. Rao off. That's the thing that will make me angry. That's the thing where I will be like, get out of my room. But I've never had to do that except one time in 37 years.
Wow.
That kid called out another girl about her weight in front of the entire class.
Mm-hmm.
And I stood up and was very firm with him. Now, I've never had to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
But kids know that if they're going to be in my room, then they're going to be nice to each other. And I'm going to model it every day. And what they do is they watch me model it to the kids that are rude and disrespectful.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, this is a funny story. I had this group of boys in my history class, and it was the first day of school, and the administrators will sometimes pop in and out of your room. And an administrator popped in and she said, do you realize, she took me outside.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, do you realize who's in your room? And I'm like, yeah, I know. Because I had watched these boys at lunch and they were so awful and disrespectful and on I could go on the negative.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I know. Later that day, another principal stepped in my room, good friend of mine. Actually, both those administrators I would call friends. I love them so much.
Mm.
And he came in my room and he pulled me outside and he goes, do you realize who's in your room? I'm like, yep, I do. Then the security guard came in and she didn't pull me out of my room. She just like got in my ear and went, do you realize who's in here? I'm like, yeah, I know. Now, that class was not easy to establish good culture because those boys wanted to destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because the way they related to one another was to pick on each other.
Yeah.
Which honestly, sometimes they were pretty funny. Like I can put up with sarcasm as a high school teacher, but when they are creating a ripple effect of icky environment in my room, I don't like that, right?
Yeah.
So I just kept praying like, God, what am I going to do with these boys? So one day God said, have these two boys stay after. And I had my prep period, right? I called their teacher and said, can I keep these two boys? She said like, yeah, I don't want them. You know, like,
save me today.
Yeah, she was like, keep them as long as you need. I mean, she loved them too. Here's the other thing. She's a good teacher, but she was like, yeah, if you can do anything, talk to them. And it was my prep period and I sat them in two desks in front of me and I just looked at them and I said, this is the beauty and the goodness I see in you. Mm. And they were like, what just happened? And then I did it to the second kid. And I'll tell you what, that first kid became one of my top students in the class by the end of the year. He got one of the highest, if not the highest grade on the final. And the kids in the classroom held him accountable.
Wow.
Because he said, I'm going to get a good grade on that thing at the end of the year. And they knew that if he got a certain grade, I was going to throw a party.
Ooh.
Yeah, he ended up having one of the highest grades in the class. The other kid, he did not achieve academically. He passed. But the thing about him, I was really worried about that guy. He started working out to increase his endorphins and feel better about his life. So I encouraged him in that realm of his life. Mm. I challenged him in the last week of school. I was like, okay, I want you to do 50 push-ups in 1 minute because I think you can do it.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. Now, I said that because I was able to do that in high school.
Okay.
I knew that a boy could do it. And so I was like, oh, did I just pick too big of a goal or what? And he did it, but it was down to the buzzer, right?
Ooh. Because
he did that, I was like, I'm giving you, this is probably illegal, but I said, I'm giving you 5 points extra credit for doing that, for having a good attitude, for being respectful, for hanging in there, for not dropping out, all of that. And he passed the class. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So sometimes we just have to wait for God to show us the gold because it might not show up for a couple of weeks or a month because they're self-protecting and they're self-promoting and they're afraid to let anybody come in close. And so you have to get those walls to come down. Yeah. And once they trust you and the walls come down and you call out their identity, the truth of who they are, then they realize their value and now they can trust you. And what's fun too is you can go around the room and each kid will say their identity. And it's hard not to cry. Like,
oh, yeah.
And some kids will say, I didn't hear anything. And that's probably for another podcast, but you can take them through what's the negative thing you're hearing. Let's replace it with the truth. And then that can lead to their identity. And honestly, sometimes they need to forgive somebody.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother lesson. Like you have to work forgiveness. Now I can do that in psychology. I can take time to go there. You can't in history or math or science. with SEL, because those are state standards, you can incorporate this stuff, this identity teaching, into any class because of SEL.
Oh, it's so good. You said the gold might not show up for a couple days, a couple weeks, or a month, but wait, and the Lord will show it to you. And I just want to emphasize that today, like whoever's listening, that God's going to show you the gold in those rough kids, because there is gold and he sees it and he's going to reveal it to you just in the right time and show you, like Dawn, about how to help that kid step up into that space of their true identity. And it might look a little different, even like cheating and giving 5 extra credit points.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I just know that when you're calling out a kid's identity, that identity has been fought against since birth in some cases.
That's a good point.
Or even in the womb. Maybe their parent didn't want them and they knew that. And they've grown up feeling rejected their whole life. And so they don't know how to receive goodness.
I know that's not a great place to end, but I want to leave you with a cliffhanger. So you join me next week to learn about how we can help students engage with the goodness of God. And hey, some of us teachers have a hard time receiving the goodness of God, but he really wants to come and serve us and teach us how to receive our true identities in him. I look forward to you joining me again next week for part 3 of the Ripple Effect of Love in Your Classroom with Dawn Rowe. Thanks for tuning into this podcast. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends in education so they too can be strengthened and encouraged in living their kingdom identity out loud in this pivotal hour. And please visit kingdomeducators.com to receive your Kingdom Educator Daily Truth Declarations, my encouraging newsletter, and be the first to know about my newest resources online and in-person events. And be sure to find me on the socials at kingdom.educators. Until next time, don't forget you are a history maker, and what you do every day is transforming lives.